Welcome to Respect the Path Workshop number 1, episode 2. I'm glad you're back. The power of thought, belief, and how the mind can change the behavior of our cells. So this is just like 6 slides that will emphasize the fact that our brains have the power to change how our cells respond to health and unhealth. So we are going to go through this, and it will lead us to the next episode 3, which will help us understand how we make these changes within our brains. It's exciting work, and I love it. This slide is the beginning of several slides, which I will share the quotes from scientists and researchers that follow this line of thinking, where our brains have a great deal to do with how our bodies respond. And we're going to go through this so that we can understand why it's so important for our individual brains to move in a way that invites light and health to our bodies. So this Brian Greene explains that Einstein's theory, string theory, suggests that everything at its most microscopic level consists of combinations of vibrating strands. The resonant patterns of vibration, the music, so to speak, of fundamental loops of string. All matter and all forces are unified under the same rubric or pattern of microscopic string oscillations, the notes that strings can play. So in simple terms, he explains that because of Einstein's theory, that everything is connected by these strands of light or vibrating powers in the universe, right down into the very DNA cells within our brains. And that there is space in our DNA cells right into the atom. And in the atom, the neutron, electron, and the proton are vibrating also. So everything in the universe is a vibrating element of matter, which we understand to be light. And it is throughout all of creation. Okay, next we see Dr. Hamilton. He wrote a book, How the Mind Can Heal the Body. And he explains that the brain and the body produce thousands of chemicals. Remember, everything, including the chemicals we're talking about, are vibrating strings of light, or he calls them beliefs or tunes that the body plays. Okay, let's just look at this. And many are constantly finding their way around the body. So the body is responding, talking to the brain. Constantly this is happening. As we switch from one mental or emotional state to another, or one expectation or belief to another, even it's just a subtle change, we change the tune or the vibration of the chemicals which are communicating with our cells. Each tune or vibration of light and chemical interfaces with cells throughout the body in a positive or negative way. So across the body, cells dance to the tune of the mind, and that's how he poetically says it. So we can start to patch things together here and understand that in the whole universe, these same laws are being obeyed, and they are also being obeyed within our own bodies. And this is important because the brain needs to be working well, and we need to understand what's happening with these chemicals so that we can help ourselves and believe differently about how our bodies process healthy things in our bodies, healthy and positive influences, positive light, positive power. And when we do that, we gain that power. We gain the light and the power to change the way our bodies process living within the cellular level. We have that power. Now, this is Dr. Joe Dispenza, who wrote the book, Evolve Your Brain, and lots of other books. And he expands on what Dr. Hamilton says by explaining that our brains adjust the number of neuropeptides or neurotransmitting receptors at any neuron site, which facilitates the type of message which is passed from the brain to the cells in the body. This is vital to understand, because if we don't believe this process, then we're not going to be working our thought work like we need to in order to make this happen in our brains. So it's simply said so far that neuropeptides or neurotransmitting receptors, and so there's neuropeptides and neurotransmitters and receptors at any neuron site. And a neuron site is just two neurons that are very close to each other, and there's a space between them, and these chemicals, these neuron peptides or neurotransmitters, are just merely different strengths or types of protein strings, and they do their job. And they do their job by facilitating the type or the kind of message that is passed through that synaptic space between the two neurons. And that is an electrical charge that moves the message depending on what neuropeptides and what neurotransmitting receptors are at play at any given time. So, simply said, when the person learns to become more patient, the flow of impatient neuropeptides will cease, and the flow of the patient neuropeptides will take over. The cells will then cut back on the number of impatient receptors because they would no longer be needed and would evolve more patient receptors instead. So, thus, as we change our mind, we change our body at the cellular level. Do we see that we are communicating at the cellular level in our brains with different parts of our bodies according to the messages which are supposed to be sent by the brain to the body? This is fantastic understanding. So let's move on and see what comes up. Okay, this is Dr. Bruce Lipton, a microbiologist turned researcher, or vice versa. His work is fantastic. The Biology of Belief is my favorite type of his book. He is explaining that genes are not destiny. For years and years, we were taught that our DNA, the genes in our DNA, were our destiny. If you had a diabetic gene that they have identified, then you were going to get diabetes so easily, and cancer and the rest of them. Now we know that genes are turned on and off all the time by how we treat our bodies, by what we take into our bodies. So we are not stuck in this destiny of being sick human beings. We are in control of our health as individuals. So thoughts, the mind's energy, directly influence how the physical brain controls the body's physiology. We are made in the image of God, and we need to put spirit back into the equation when we want to improve our physical and our mental health. And here is a full-on straight scientific guy, and in his studies, in the process of writing these books and doing these studies, he has recognized that spirit changes our physical and mental health. We need to pay attention to this. This is Dr. Lipton again, and this is a quote from the documentary, or rather the documentary and the book called Heal. They're both called the same thing, but this is from the book on page 47. Fantastic. You're going to want to watch that documentary. It's called Heal, or read his book, read the book by Noonan. As I change my thought, I change my chemistry. Thus, I have the ability to control my genetic activity. I am not a victim of my heredity. I am a master of my genetic activity. Do we see the power that we can embrace in these things, in understanding this and believing it? And then in the next segment of this workshop, I'm going to start teaching you about the brain and how we do that actual training of the brain. You're going to love it. All right, one more quote from Dr. Lipton. When we change our beliefs, now he's talking belief, not just a thought. We're changing our belief because the feelings we have in us also influence that synaptic work we were talking about. We change the blood's neurochemical composition, which then initiates a complementary change in the body's cells. The conclusion is simple. Positive perceptions in the mind enhance healthy immune functions. Negative perceptions can also create debilitating chronic psychological stress that has a profound and negative impact on gene function. So we can influence the genes back to the ugly part that they're working on us in the DNA promise that we're going to get some awful disease. If we don't treat our bodies and minds properly, the body will take its path. But what we are saying is that we have the power in us to make the changes in not only individual thoughts that we're going to train to bring light, but in our perceptions. In other words, our faith. What does our faith have to do with any of this? What does the power of the light from the creators have to do with this? We are imbued with this amazing power within us as human women to move through life with the power of light in us. So when we are struggling with a disease or chronic pain or betrayal trauma or addiction, we must understand that we have within us the power to make those changes that are needed in order to find relief or find the power to change the way we think, or stop an addiction, or bring more compassion in our lives. 1,000 things that we have the power to do that we're not paying attention to. This is on a very mental and physical and cellular level. And I hope we can appreciate that. So for this particular little episode, we have a little assignment, and you're going to write down. Now, you've written down several things. If you've listened to any of my podcasts, you've written down several things, and they're all very important for us to remember, and because we're going to use them in our thought work and in our controlling our minds. And so I'm asking you now to write down 3 things or 3 thought patterns, ways in which thoughts come to you, and the very thought itself, what the thought says to your mind and body, that bring you discomfort, that bring you worry, that bring you angst or anger. Write those down because we're going to use them. Remember, this is a workshop and there is work involved. So we're going to do this training and this thought work beginning next episode. And I appreciate that you're listening and that you're participating. And so I'll see you next time.